Episode 2 of Welcome to Derry begins with Lily waking up after a horrific nightmare, repeating her encounter with the CGI baby in the theatre. This wasn't just a dream though, and the massacre is very real, with Ronnie's dad Hank, who runs the theatre, the prime suspect. Now police sit outside his place and theorise what happened, but Hank had an alibi given he was tucked up in bed that night. Unfortunately, this isn't going to be enough to convince the police. Hank's mum is determined and tells Hank to send Ronnie back to school. She's convinced that this is the best way for her to get ahead in life and get out of Derry. Meanwhile, Major Leroy catches wind of the recent disappearances from the newspaper and settles into his new house with his son Will and wife Charlotte. Naturally, they get some side-eye glances from the folks in the neighbourhood, but Will's focus is on a new telescope that Charlotte has got for him. Leroy is still hung up over the masked goons that attacked him at the base though, and it doesn't take a genius to work out it may have been Masters, the man who refused to salute him in episode 1. Now, Colonel Fuller promises that justice will come swiftly after arresting him. Leroy isn't exactly convinced that this is the whole story. At school, Ronnie is the talk of the town with the popular girls whispering about her and the murders. Marge, Lily's friend that's desperate to get in with their crew, stands on the periphery. She obviously cares about how Lily is doing, but more from a superficial popularity stance. Marge calls Lily out in class for talking to Ronnie and what a bad look it is for her credibility, but Lily simply snubs at her concern. Will arrives in class and is immediately a target of pranks, while Charlotte is shocked over the flippant attitude in town toward public bullies beating down a kid in the streets. The butcher simply claims that boys will be boys. Charlotte is riled up and takes these concerns to the dinner table that night, pointing out that the people in Derry are shockingly nonchalant to violence on the streets. Leroy suggests laying low, not wanting to draw attention to themselves and bringing up an incident that happened in Shreveport. Tellingly, Charlotte doesn't want to talk about it. Meanwhile, Ronnie has a frightening vision that night of being back in her mother's womb, drowning and having to force her way out. Birth seems to be a constant motif in this prequel series, and it doesn't get any better for Ronnie here. Her contorted mother shames Ronnie for breaking her, like she'll break her dad. When Ronnie tries to flee, she realises she's attached to this nightmarish creature by an umbilical cord which pulls her closer. Ronnie's mum's stomach turns to menacing razor-sharp teeth and it looks to pull her in. Thankfully, Hank shows up and the vision ends. Now, Derry's chief of police, whom we later find out is Chief Bowers, drinks at the bar where he's threatened by locals to hurry up and arrest Hank for the murders. Unfortunately, Dick and his fellow black soldiers are kicked out the bar for being a little too rowdy and wind up stumbling back to base drunk. Dick and the others are cleared at the front gate with special permission, which seems to indicate that Dick is pretty high up the chain of command here. Now, Dick's job appears to be digging something important up from the ground, and he's had permission from the airbase to dig numerous different sites to try and find it. No pun intended. The Colonel is starting to grow impatient though and wants results. At school, a flustered Ronnie speaks to Lily at lunch. While Marge tries, and fails, to impress the cool kids by throwing her friend under the bus, Ronnie urges Lily to tell the truth about the monster in the theatre. The thing is, Lily knows better than most what this could mean. She could be sent back to Juniper Hills again, and despite it ironically being the safest place for her, she's loath to do it. And Ronnie kicks off and curses her out, which gets the girl a one-way ticket to detention. Now Will follows suit too and ends up joining her, when he's blamed for a prankster throwing a stink bomb in the hallway. As for Lily, she's taken to the police station where we see there are a ton of different missing or deceased children away from just Matty and the movie Massacre kids. Now Chief Bowers questions Lily, and with the threat of being sent to Juniper Hills waved in her face, Lily is coerced to change her story to claim she doesn't know if Hank was there that night or not. This is enough for Hank to be arrested and taken away, while Ronnie approaches Lily about what she's done. She's ranting and raving, livid that she'd do this, but Lily's mum shuts the door in the girl's face. Back at the airbase, Leroy shows up to see Masters and realises that he wasn't the one in his room the other night. Given the sheer speed necessary for loading and cocking the gun in Leroy's face, it doesn't match Masters' profile, given he's unwieldy with a gun. Now Masters proves his point when Leroy lays down a loaded pistol and taunts him. Masters struggles to use it, so Leroy speaks to General Shaw next and confirms Masters is innocent. Now Leroy is going to file a report with OSI to request a further investigation. However, he needn't do that because General Shaw confirms it was him who stormed his room that night. Shaw has been looking for a man who has no fear, and he has a job he needs Leroy's help with. The man has passed with flying colours. Now at the store, Lily has a frightening encounter of her own while shopping. Strange voices begin taunting her and she's watched from afar by the different shoppers. Down a cereal aisle, the boxes hold the faces of those who died and they turn rotten. Predictably, perhaps, the aisle turns to a squared prison of pickles given what we know about Lily's past. One distorts to show her father's face, and after smashing the jar on the ground, the vision becomes all the more horrific, until she's suddenly snapped out of her vision by the manager of the store. The single smashed jar sits on the floor in front of her. While Lilly is taken to Juniper Hills, back at base, Shaw explains that he's fronting an operation that would end the Cold War, threatening armies with something that causes fear. Of course, this has to be something related to the entity of It, which they're looking for with the dig sites. The entity appears to be surrounded by beacons, and in finding those, they could close in on It. Well, Shaw and the others head to the dig site, where they excavate a car with skeletal remains inside, which is where episode 2 comes to an end. So it appears that the military are going to be using It to try and win the Cold War, but in doing so clearly underestimate this thing's power and how dangerous it can be. The horror sequences this episode are much better, actually drawing on paranoia and seclusion more than group dynamics and settings. The movie theatre drama continues to hang over our titular characters, and with Hank now arrested, it remains to be seen how he'll be able to get out of that situation. Lily is easily the strongest character in the show though, with the best backstory rife for exploration and mining. We're already seeing some of this with the way Pennywise is taunting and teasing her about the past, and Lily is clearly consumed by guilt, paranoia and fear, perfect fodder for this entity to feed. We're still yet to see the killer clown in its usual form, but thankfully we don't get any CGI babies to contend with this time around. The military subplot is interesting, but the jury is still out over exactly how that's going to feed into the larger storyline and how the show will handle that going forward. For now though, there's enough in Welcome to Derry to make for an enjoyable watch, but it's still early days with this one, and the jury is still out over whether it can make a massive splash in the horror TV sphere. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.